will start the last session of this morning, which will be again, open to ask your questions about the presentation that was made, especially about the presentation that was made by Dr. Tariq on human rights. So we will dedicate the session for that. And if there are any other secondary or other questions that are related maybe to the summer school in general, you can eventually ask them also.
Regarding the balance, so when you talk about the balance between the right and the obligations, so are you focusing only on the what you call right of myself, so in liberating my heart, or you have other other right that needs to be balanced? So if you can please just elaborate a little bit on this balance point.
My question is going to be regarding the idea of ijma'. Generally, while discussing with some friends, and we speak how ethical relativism is something dangerous. On the other hand, the counter argument would be you have the text anyway have many different interpretations. And my answer would be, well, but we have ijma' al-ulama, like the consensus of scholars who would say if that's right or wrong, and accordingly somehow is going to be make the idea of going out of the purpose of the text somehow end up being terrorist or something like that. With the text, with the consensus of scholars of understand the text, that would be limiting this idea. But at the end of the day, you're going to have very different interpretations of many things. And the idea of لا تجتمع أمتي على ضلالة, who is the ummah then? Who is the scholars at least? What are the qualities of the scholars who are required to have this ijtima' or ijma'? Thank you.
I wanted to return to the point about child marriage and slavery, not to belabor the point, but I really think it's critical to dealing with human rights discourse from a Maqasidi perspective. Basically, yes, no. So I think it's critical because in situations where there's no clear legal injunction in the text, how do we deal with? So with child marriage and slavery, on the one hand, there's no clear legal injunction, right? On the other hand, there's practices of the Prophet ﷺ that he had slaves, that he potentially married a child, and those are what are those practices are what in reality are being used to interpret the divine will behind these issues of slavery and child marriage that keep coming up in human rights discourse. And I feel like it's disingenuous to say that there's no legal injunction, so these are not relevant, when that really goes to the heart of the issue. And I think that I have a concern with scholars being unwilling to really deal with the morality of the issue. With slavery, for example, in the Islamic world, it was abolished because of economic pressure from the West. It wasn't jurists who came together and really looked at this issue. Is slavery moral under Islamic law or not? And so when we didn't deal with that issue, we now have modern day forms of slavery, forced labor, human trafficking being justified with Quranic text because we've never really actually confronted the morality of the issue. So I guess my question is about how to deal with these issues where there's no injunction in the legal text, and sort of avoiding the issue because there's no injunction. Okay, thank you.
I want to get some advice from Dr. Tariq Ramadan for Muslim women in Europe. I really need some advice about it. How to live in Europe if you are Muslim women. What? Yeah, exactly. Because No, because you know what? Because now Muslim women need in Europe have to choose if she will wear hijab, she needs to stay at home and she cannot work. Or she can take off the hijab and be part of the community. So really, I think that's now it's big problem for Muslim women. So I need some comment about that.
I live in America. I feel like most of the questions that we're constantly being challenged with are those very questions that we are now asking and are very controversial, and that both you and Sheikh Shawqi have very different approaches to it, and one of them is traditional, and the other is theoretical, but also you tend to want to apply very attractive theories into the betterment of society, and especially the Muslim communities. So within the political context of Muslim majority countries, you'll find that most of the violations of human rights, يعني بمعنى الكلمة, are being violated. And for example, in Yemen, they still have tribes where they not only have black African slaves, but they breed them. By breeding, I mean exactly that. They make an African man mate with an African woman, and then later they take this child, and they just a never-ending circle of slavery. And this is in Yemen. So, and in Egypt, for example, people are being imprisoned and jailed for advocating basic human rights needs. So, يعني, yeah, so, so يعني, where, يعني, and all of these things are influenced by our Islamic laws. So, yani, where do you come from? Yani, where is your place? Yani, where can I say, here are the tools, let's go. Also with FGM, for example, female general genital cutting, it's done in the name of Islam. It's done in the name of the hadith that's very vague. So, and I think we have, it's not all philosophical, but also religion plays a major role. يعني ahkams have been drawn from Al-Quran or from Hadith, whether there are comments or vague or sahih or not. So, يعني, how can I, يعني, for the betterment of the Muslim majority communities, how can I, Rana, who is really concerned, go and approach a family or approach a community and say, well, you sit down and say, you guys are doing it wrong. Let's focus on the better picture. Yani, yalla, let's do it. Yani, let's fix it. Is it going to be us? Yani, are we the first generation? Yani, are you working? Is your discourse? Are we the first generation of what you want to apply? Am I your diplomat? Am I going to go back and say, yeah, guys, let's look at the big picture? Or are we to implement what you're saying now? Or are you waiting for my kids to do it? Is the effect going to be on my kids or now? Sorry, I'm so sorry. This is a long question. I've listened for so long. Thank you.
There's a lot of debate in Australia about whether a Bill of Rights or a sort of a listed rights is required. And I think, like, from historically, the issue has always been whether human rights itself is something inherent that can be protected and when the time comes, versus whether it needs to be listed. And I think from what I'm sort of the discussion today, it seems that, to me, having a Bill of Rights feeds into this culture of rights that you're talking about. But then again, if you don't have something written like that, it feeds into injustices, because there's a lot of nebulous concepts about, what are indigenous rights. There's migration issues and, refugee issues. So I just wanted to comment on how do you reconcile these two things? Because, about like whether you need to have a listed set of rights, versus whether you have this nebulous concept of, rights are inherent and, they'll be protected by the people, by the law when the time comes. Because I think in both circumstances, there's injustices. And, I don't think it gives the solution. But that's where the discourse is sort of set at the moment. And just wanted to comment on that.
So now, when you were asking, is it possible to share the responsibility without God? And I think that once again, we might not agree on the fact that we are saying Allahu la ilaha illahu, that there is God and there is, but there is something that we can find, as much as we can find with people who are atheists. And in fact, to tell you the truth, the people who are not believers, who are closer to what I have experienced at the grassroots level in the social, are anarchists. Are saying no God, no master, but they have something which is the sense of responsibility, a moral responsibility. So we may come together with people, they don't believe in God, but they have a strict sense of moral responsibility. Of course we can find this. So as much as we can start with rationality, if we speak about this, it's the universality of a discourse on human responsibility is something that could be understood. And especially in the time where the people are facing catastrophes, because we know that we are responsible of what we do to the world today. So catastrophes is coming back to responsibility. So this is why we can have a common universal discourse on that, with God or without God. And I think that this is something which is important. You were asking the mutual discussion and the mutual respect at which level and where. I think everywhere, at all the levels, between citizens, at the level where we are in our job, in our respective space, this is where we have to interact with our fellow citizens when it comes to this. And now in the work that we have been doing, it's also to be involved in institutions and to work in different fields. So it could be in anything which has to do with social justice. I keep on repeating that the Muslims should get it right. In fact, our presence should not only be during Ramadan to show solidarity and to give food for the poor. We need to be committed to justice. It has to do with the legal thing. So this is why I think it's important to be involved in Islamophobia, but not only, anything which has to do with racism and equal rights. So when you were saying Black Lives Matter, I just cannot imagine or understand how we can be outside this. How is it possible not to support that? And say, you know what, we still have racism inside. And I'm sorry, I was unhappy with Hamza Yusuf's answer on this. I'm very unhappy. But it's not the only one. He's just revealing something which is happening in the American society. I was one of the only one going the same weekend, the same day, in the same city, going to two different conventions, one from the black people and the other one for the migrant people. Not coming together. Not coming together. The people from Warith al-Din, you know, the son of Elijah Muhammad, who came back and brought back to the mainstream, the black American, African American, and the other side, the Easter Convention. And both are saying we are all brothers. But these people are black and these people are white and not so white. But they don't very much like the black. That's the reality of it. And there you have a feeling that you are a second-class citizen or second-class Muslim because you are black. So I think that that's really where we have to be involved. So at every level, through our personal commitment, to our institutions, in all the fields, this is where this mutual respect with people working on human rights, we have to be there. We have to be, for example, with all what is saying. And some of the voices that we have in the West, but also in the global South, you know, when I listen to what is coming from Bolivia, for example, we have some Muslim brothers there working with the government and saying we have a cultural resistance. So the cultural resistance is not, we don't abide and we are not agreeing with all the European policies towards Latin American countries. What they are saying is very close to us. Where are the Muslims? Where are the Muslims in this? It's as if we are completely disconnected. So I think that we need to have people involved and getting a sense of the transversal and crossing the board potential alliances with people. So I would say it's social, it's political, it's also intellectual. You have so many scholars, so many people working within academia. They might not agree with us as to our beliefs, but they agree with us as to racism, discrimination, domination, structure, understanding the world. And we have to work together. We have to. So I would say it's, so where are the Muslims in this discussion? Who asked this question? So it was you. I think they are not visible enough. And as I said at the beginning of my talk, it's either we show that we accept everything or we reject everything, or we want to be accepted in the, and I think our critical contribution in the discussion is not visible enough. So now we have more and more students who are now teachers, lecturers, professors. We have people who are intellectuals. We have activists. This is the job. This is where we have to be involved in the discussion. But once again, it starts with the big picture is how do we consider our role in the world today? So this obsession with Islamophobia and the fact that the people don't like Islam and we are just selling a good image of Islam, it's misleading. It puts us straight away on the defensive, not on something which is a critical discussion. So this is why I really think to be against Islamophobia is good. To go beyond is necessary as to the vision that we have, what we are bringing into the discussion. So the practical spiritual liberation, yes, I really think it has to be practical by asking the true question. So for example, I'm writing now a manifesto for an Islamic liberation theology, and the first section is on that. It's really about this. It's what is the true meaning of spiritual liberation when it comes to the relationship that you have with your ego. Why, for example, we are so strict with some of the pillars in Islam? It's because this is a liberating process. This is very practical. Quran is a liberating reading. Praying is liberating. Fasting, coming now, it's liberating us from the consumerist society. And this is why we have to understand it's all spiritual at the beginning. This is very practical. This is the first resistance. Our rituals are the first resistance. And then the way we are going to deal with the consumerist society, how we are going to deal with our own ego, when we are going to deal with our rights, with racism and all this. This is an ongoing process from the self to the social commitment. I never said when I was referring to this about the halal and the haram. I was saying that these are the pillars through which and from which you start to be involved, to be committed. I keep on repeating something the Prophet ﷺ prayed during the night to change the world during the day. So this is the practical spirituality, the dynamic spirituality. Is you get the meaning during the night and to change the world and yourself, by the way, during the day. So I think that this is a process which is important, but it's not about the rules. While at the same time, I'm not underestimating the rules. I'm just making, I want the rules to remain means and to keep the meaning alive. And this is the spiritual thing that I'm talking about. So I responded about homosexuality and Islamic resistance. What you were saying very quickly about the other rights is my duty, where you were saying something like that, which is, who asked this question? It was you. It's and in fact, this is also something which is said very often by human rights activists, is that when you tell them, you know, the duties are not really there, they are changing them by saying, in fact, the rights but I would say I understand that. But in fact, if we are realistic and practical, we look at the way the instruments are used. It's true that objectively, the other rights are my duties, but it's not working like this. Because the way we are, for example, dealing with the relationship with ourselves, thinking about the other, so the mediation of the other to come to my duty doesn't work. You understand? I don't come to my duty through the rights of the other. Why am I saying this? Because this is exactly what we have as a problem when it comes to environmental issue. We come to the principles because we are facing catastrophes. It's not the starting point of the whole discussion. And I would add to this something else. But that's the problem. That's the problem. It's I think that the real concern about the rights of the oppressed is to start by questioning the duties of the oppressors or the dominant thing, and not to start by them. Because at the end, it could destroy the whole discourse. And I think that this is why, just to put it bluntly, I think that Western Muslims have a role to play with all human beings of conscience in the West. Is to start with our responsibility. It's both. It's speaking about the rights, speaking about our duties. It's the voice of the oppressed is also to challenge the oppressors. I'm not going to be happy with the South saying our rights and not being critical with the whole system by saying, what about your duties? What about what you are doing? What exactly about this? You might have to give up some of your privileges for us to live in a just society. So my rights have to do with your duties, with your mindset, not only with just promote my rights. Have you heard about the book speaking about the tears of the white man? Just changing the whole conception of, the colonizers blaming themselves for what they did, and at the same time they were civilizing the world. You can see the mindset of this exactly there. So I would say it's deep in this discussion. It's the way we are constructing the discourse coming from the oppressed. And this is why I think that in this discussion, by the way, all what I said about human rights, it's very important to integrate this into a discussion on power. Where is power? That's essential. I didn't mention this, but I should have, because at the end, Allah being the owner, the power is coming from there, but it's also dealing with us, our relationship. So I spoke about this, what is happening in the mosque. I speak the major roles today in order to make change. As I said, our major role as how we have to be involved in at different levels. I spoke about that. There was one question that you were talking about in zakat and its application. I think it's very superficial the way we are implementing zakat. We are using zakat as a solidarity means, and something which is much more helping the people to support them in their needs, not to bring them towards autonomy. This is one. So I think that from within the Muslim community. And now we have a very narrow understanding. If you propose something and at the end it's going to be supportive to Muslims and people of other faiths, it's not possible with zakat. That's not the only opinion that we have. So really we have to go further than that, and there is no problem by thinking in Western societies the way we have to implement. But you know what we need to do? If you want to implement zakat rightly in the West, you need to study the structure of the state, which type of support you have, which type of taxes, and then you think about it within this context. We are not doing that. We are doing it as assisting people. Zakat is not about assisting, it's freeing people. It's not about assisting you to remain assisted. It's helping you to be autonomous. So it's a whole philosophy. So based once again on our duties, and I think that we have to go. So Ijma, you can answer the marriage and slavery, the question that you had. I really think that your questions are critical. We have to deal with this because of the impact it has on Muslim majority countries. I completely agree with this. And it means also what you were saying, so I will let Shawqi speak, but about what you are saying, and no, I am talking to you, because inshallah you will talk to your children. I might not be here to talk to your children, by the way. And it might be that I talked to your mother or your father a long time ago, Allahu A'lam, and keep on repeating what we are saying. No, it's now. It's now. We are talking about now. And what I'm saying is that all what I'm saying is to be constructively critical towards the West in order to change things for the better. We have to do exactly the same in Muslim majority countries, and we know we are going to pay the price. We are going to pay the price. The fact that, for example, being banned from night countries because I'm challenging, I went to African countries and say, for example, female mutilations, that's not Islamic. I went and I challenged the authority in Mali about this by saying it's not Islamic, while in Burkina Faso the Muslim was supporting. But I kept the same stance. We are not going to give up on this. We have to speak out. This is not Islamic. We cannot support this. So in African countries to go to Muslim majority countries and to be able to say, yes, even if now this center is in Qatar, you will see and listen to me saying publicly that anything which has to do with modern slavery and having migrant workers mistreated and treated like nothing, it's unacceptable by all standards. And we are not going to have a center for ethics in Qatar and accepting that we are going to keep quiet about this. And this is why we have somebody working on this. We have to carry on, and we have not to be critical for the sake of being critical, but to push for things to change. So we have to have this voice. You from where you are, talking about what is happening in Yemen, what is happening in Egypt, what is happening in so many countries, in the way we have modern slavery today. That's unacceptable. And the fact that some in our tradition were supporting some attitudes based on the legal thing and the silence of the scholars and saying, no, this was old, but it's still used, we can't accept that. So we have to be critical. But once again, you know that you have to pay a price for that. Sometimes it's for you not to go back to your country. Sometimes it's the pressure, and you have two fronts, so to speak, here in the West. And but I think that your question is it's a very important one, and I'm not trying to have an attractive theory, because in fact, what I'm saying it's more demanding than attractive. Because it's very demanding. It's really, we have to work now. We have to be intellectually committed to find ways to set institutions, to do the job, to be courageous. I keep on repeating. CILE without courage is nothing. It's nothing if you're not going to challenge the thoughts and the traditional thoughts and say, okay, we are ready for the intellectual discussion and debate. It's not going to work, even with you. Even with you, because we had some people who are supportive and some who are not. We have to go. We have to be involved in this discussion. And I think that in so many Muslim majority countries, the basic human rights are violated, and that's unacceptable. And we have to be clear. And it's not only about Daesh. It's not about Boko Haram. It's about even the allies of the Western countries, what they are doing and in the way they are behaving. So are you ready? Are you ready as free human beings to say what you have to say? And sometimes we have to think about it, not in a crazy way. I keep on repeating, sometimes in some country, let some people speak for you, because if you are coming from this country, you better avoid talking about it, because they are going to retaliate on your family. So you know how Amnesty International is doing the thing, is whenever you criticize a country, it's never somebody from the country. Why? Because of the families. So they have a way of doing this. We have to think about that, but we have to be vocal. It's not possible. And as to Muslim women in Europe, what you were, give me just 5 minutes to respond to this one. It is a big problem. It is a big problem for many reasons, because in our history, the new visibility of the Muslim communities very often is also through the women's presence and the dress and the hijab and the khimar, in fact, called the hijab, and we have this. Now, there are positions, and as I said, for me, if you read the last book, this Introduction to Islam, I keep on repeating, it is an Islamic prescription, al-hijab. Now, you have to deal with the context, and you have to understand the context, and you have to deal with your own self. Now, the last thing that I would like is to have a non-visible women's presence in the West. We need to have the women being present. Now it depends on the context within which you live. That's not true that in all the Western societies you cannot wear the headscarf, or you can't. That's not true. You can in many countries, and it's not a problem. You have things in many countries. In the UK, for example, at the highest level, in universities, they are teaching, no problem. In the French countries, it's problematic. And now you have a bad perception because of, and even in the States, it happened. Now, are we going to remove it just to please the people? I don't think so. We need to have a distinctive ethical presence with the way we are, with our visibility, with our headscarves. This is the positive presence, which is don't always talk about why you are visible through your dress, but how we are going to be visible through your good behavior within the society as a woman. And we want women to be more vocal, we want them to be visible, we want them to be socially involved. So everyone now have to ask, every woman has to ask herself, where am I in my spiritual journey? What can I do? And in which way am I going to implement this? No one has the right to come to you and to say you are not a good Muslim because you don't wear the headscarf. Shut up. It's none of your business. That's me and God. Now, you have the duty to assess where you are. That's your personal journey. No one has the right, but you have the duty. No one has the right to put you within or outside the Muslim community. No one, even your father or your brother, no one. But you have the duty to know where you are in this spiritual journey and you take a decision. So now if you feel that it's not the time for you, you don't, but you are within a society, make your presence visible through the way you behave, through the way you serve, to the way you are able to say, if you don't wear the headscarf, for example, to say, I will never accept coming from you any word which is criticizing my sisters in Islam because they wear the headscarf. At least you have these words. Not as we have now, some of our sisters saying, you know, I don't wear it, I'm moderate. And they keep quiet about the others. That's not the positive presence. We have to make it something which is a positive presence here. And this is what, and then you have to assess your context, your spiritual journey. And if I may tell you something, let the people know that it's between you and God. You shut up. You let me do what I have to do. I know what are my obligations and my journey, and I will decide for myself. But be careful. Decide for yourself means that you have to decide for yourself. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. It's a double meaning here. God is not asking you more than what you can bear, but you have to do it. Whatever you can do, you have to do it. So this is up to you. Wallahu a'lam.
Just to reply quickly on the issue of consensus, ijma'. Well, in usul fiqh, there is a consensus on consensus, which means that because some people trying to say that there is no consensus, there is a consensus. This is not the issue, but there is another issue. There is you will find in the books of usul al-fiqh that there are three adilla or three sources where there is no debate around: al-Quran, wal-Sunnah, wal-Ijma'. So you will not find among the schools of fiqh any debate about the ijma' as a reference, as a legal reference. So this is in Malikiyya and Shafi'iyya and Hanafiyya and Al-Hanbaliyya and the 8 schools and even the Zahiriyya, etc. About all the other references, there is divergence. Now the diversion about ijma' is not about it being a reference, but about what is it, and what is its scope, and what is its definition. And here we have a lot of a very big difference. Now we have on one side people who, so schools of thought or schools of fiqh and scholars who are saying that ijma' is a reference in the sense that, or with the definition of ijma', that it's the fact that all the scholars of one era, of one period of time, they all agree on a specific ruling. This is their definition. And they say this is ijma' and this is the reference that should be followed, and if you don't follow it, you are against Islam. Now the problem here of this position is that it's very problematic. First of all, how do you define a scholar? Who is the scholar, who is not? Who is in and who is out? Because you know, if you look at usul fiqh, the criteria that is put to define who is the mujtahid, scholar, we are talking about al-mujtahid, ijma' al-mujtahideen. Who is the mujtahid? Big divergence. Does he have to know this? He doesn't have to know that, etc. They diverge. So who is it? Who is he? And how can we know that this one we can count his voice, or we don't count it, and if he diverged and he doesn't count within the ijma'? First problem. Second problem is, how can you, especially at that period, how can you collect all of their opinions? How can you know? Maybe there is one, I don't know in which country, that said something that is against this opinion. How can you know that all of them agreed? It's impossible. So even if you take all the books of that period, some people didn't write down their opinion. Some people maybe changed their opinion. They expressed at one point of time their opinion, then they changed their mind. This is another problem. Another problem is it possible that all scholars agree on something on which there is no text, for example? It's impossible almost. Because there is no text, which means that they will use their al-adilla al-aqliya, the rational tools. And here, you know, we will diverge because my appreciation or my evaluation of the reality, my evaluation of the element that I want to give an opinion on will be different according to several criteria. So is it even possible? So here, this is why other scholars said the ijma' with this definition is just impossible, just khayal. And they said, give me one example about an ijma' that happened, you know, for example, one ijma' that happened without any, without being there a text that is immutable. There's no one single, you know, relevant or right example of that. This is why their opinion, and here we are talking about essentially a Zahiri school, essentially Ibn Hazm and several other scholars, from Ibn Hazm until Shawkani, who takes this position also, and then later on even, you know, modern scholars like Rashid Rida, who has, you know, very long detailed research on this in his Tafsir al-Manar, and a lot of other scholars until coming to Abdul Wahab Khalaf and a lot of others. Their position is, okay, ijma' is a reference, but not with this definition, because it's just impossible. And their definition is that ijma' is the fact that all scholars, all the opinions agree on a ruling based on an immutable text. The ijma', this is the ijma'. So here the ijma' is not really a source, or not really even a methodological instrument or something from which I can extract ruling, but it's only an indicator that is telling me, watch out, there is an immutable text. There is ijma', so it means that there is an immutable text, and this issue is not open for ijtihad. This is their position. But I don't know if this was your question.
So there is no ijma' on ijma' at the end.
There is no ijma' on the definition of ijma'. There is ijma' on ijma' as a reference, because there is ijma', and because if there is ijma', it means that behind this, if there is ijma', behind this there is an immutable text that made that all of them, you know, they say that this is it and nothing else. There is immutable text, or, you know, there are several elements, immutable text, or there is a tadafur. So here we have, I don't want to go into details, but we have immutable on two levels. Immutable on the level of authenticity, and this is, here we have what they call a tawatur, and the tawatur can be tawatur ma'nawi or tawatur lafzi. And of course, tawatur lafzi is very few. Tawatur lafzi, which means that, you know, there is a text, and here we speak about a hadith. A text, a hadith, that is mutawatir, which means that the change of the hadith, you have change that makes, if we study theoretically, and here this is called a tawatur al-nadari, a theoretical tawatur. We have a tawatur al-tawatur al-hukmi, or tawatur al-nadari. Tawatur al-nadari is a theoretical tawatur, which means that when I theoretically study the chain of the hadith, I came to the conclusion that this hadith came from several ways and several narrators, which makes it impossible that those narrators, all of them at the same time, they lied, or at the same time they just, you know, they made a mistake. It's impossible, because there are so many, and they never met each other, and it's not possible that they agreed on a lie, or they made the same mistake in the same way at the same time. Theoretically, rationally speaking, it's just impossible, and this is what they call a tawatur al-nadari. And of course, the Quran is also mutawatir in its whole. This is from on the level of the authenticity, and then we have on the level of the content, and here also we have a tawatur al-ma'nawi, No, التواتر المعنوي is different than the تواتر لفظي. تواتر لفظي, which means that the text literally it's the same term. تواتر المعنوي is the meaning. The meaning, all of them they brought the same meaning. So here we have this on the level of the chain or the authenticity. Then on the level of the content, we have a tawatur also of a meaning that is coming in all the texts. And here we have a tadafur, which means that, okay, individually this text, we can diverge on it. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ, perform prayer. Here I can say, okay, I interpret this text and I say prayer is not obligatory, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just recommending prayer, Here الأمر ليس للوجوب ولكن للاستحباب, and here it's not obligatory, it's only recommended because of this, and I look for the illah, etc. I can, if looking at this text individually, but it's impossible because there is tadafur, which means that there are so many texts speaking about this injunction that it's just impossible for me to get with another opinion than that prayer is obligatory. So here we have ijma'. Why? Not because the scholars, they agreed or something, or because there is an immutable text. And how can I define that? How can I know that it's immutable with certain of those elements that I just explained? Tawatur, tadafur, etc. Al-muhkam, al-nas al-muhkam, etc., etc.
Yes, but
yes.
If I may, on this discussion, my starting point would be exactly the opposite of Shashawri. When he's saying there is an ijma' on ijma', I would say, understanding what we talk about ijma', there is no ijma' on ijma'. We don't agree on the definition. We don't agree on the methodology. We don't agree on the object. Because for the great majority in Usul al-Fiqh was even thinking about the fact, how are we going to come together when the text is not clear-cut? At the end, we are coming back saying, oh, we all agree on the clear-cut text. So we are making ijma' on the clear-cut text, not ijma' on something that is, what are we going to add to this? So even on this, we don't agree. And the contemporary scholars are coming with another understanding, and some relying on the Shafi'i, others are saying, we don't agree. So my position, the only thing on which we agree, Al-Quran was Sunnah. That's my position, by saying even behind the fact that, yes, we all speak about ijma', no definition, no object, no methodology. So what is it? What is it? And at the end, is it ijma' to be able to say la ijtihad ma'an nas because the text is clear cut and so we to come? That's a problem. So I would say that as a third source, it's problematic. That would be my position on that.
So there is ijma' between us, at least.
No, agreement. We are not a community, not yet.
The question again, it came back again about, okay, I was presented by having a class, what did you say, traditional? The traditional approach and the radical approach. This is how you presented us.
I did not use any labels.
No, you said you had the traditional,
I think that's
or who said this? Ah, you said this. Traditional approach and radical approach. Okay. Anyhow, I don't think my approach is traditional in the sense that the instruments that I'm using are traditional, but the way I'm using them is not traditional, because I think that the problem, one of the major problem, is that those traditional tools often they were not used properly because of the weight and the pressure of history, of culture, of certain pre-established conceptions. And part of my work is to try to revisit, because I think that our heritage is very rich. 1,400 years, I think this is something that is huge. And this is something, often I see people, they want to reinvent the wheel, but it's there. So I think it's those elements are very useful to revisit. I don't think it's enough. The heritage is enough to enable us today to be faithful to the divine will in our current reality. I don't think it's enough, the methodological features that were left and the heritage. Why? Because several reasons. I may explain this later. But I think it's very, very useful. And I think it's a very, very good ground and good basis to start with. And this is why, I did some work on revisiting texts and revisiting opinions with the same methodological tools that were used by the scholars. And in that sense, you cannot say that in that way I'm traditional, even though I don't have any problem with saying this. But if you look at my position on, for example, the marriage, my position on slavery or marriage, for example, with a child, I will say slavery is haram. And I will tell you, marrying a child today of 6 years, you cannot. But this, this was not the position of all the traditional scholars. All the traditional scholars will say, slavery is halal. And marrying a young child is halal. And when fighting with the enemy, taking their woman as a ghanima, as a... No, ghanima is a butin de guerre. Booty, as a booty, All the traditional scholars will say this is halal, this is good, and it's useful. But so I'm using their same methodologies to say no, it's haram. So here you see, and their methodology tell us that it's haram. For example, I told you, I explained to you the methodology of Shatibi of, he said there's not only 5 ahkam in time revelation, but there are 6. And so here we can understand slavery, we can understand, we can make a distinction between what is cultural, and so it's not my religion. It's not part of my religion, and it's not part of the message that the Prophet came with, to allow marriage with young children. And it's not a part of the message which the Prophet came with to allow slavery. It was a social, cultural reality. So here, this is a very useful methodology to distinguish between what is religion and what is not. So the point here is not to, I am coming to your question, the point is not to escape the question, no. Because, you know why? My problem is the how do you call it, the apologetical approach. This is my problem. I mean here, saying that it's cultural has nothing to do with religion, for me it's not escaping. Because, my problem is to say that this hadith is it's in Bukhari, but it's okay, we dismiss. Okay, but what do? You have to escape a lot of things. What do you do with khitan al-nisa, the how do you call it? The circumcision of women. It's in the text. What do you do with ridda? Man baddala dinahu faqtuluh. Who changed religion, kill him. It's in the text. What do you do with
what do we do
what do you do with slavery? It's in the text. What do you do with taking bounty of the woman from the woman of the enemy? It's in the text. What? I'm coming to this. What do you do with marriage with young children? It's in the text. I'm not talking about. I'm talking about hadith. I'm not talking about sunnah. I make a distinction between sunnah and hadith, and I may come to this. What do you do with stoning? What do you do with stoning? Not to women, but men and women, because the West are talking about women. Men and women who are adultery. It's in the text. What do you do with the Prophet saying that women are less intelligent than men? It's in the text. What do you do? Okay, what do you do with this? Now you can. My point is here. You can't say no. This all is dhaif. All of them is not in the hadith. It's not in Bukhari. I'm coming.
None of them is in Quran. Why?
Wait, I'm coming. You cannot. It's impossible for you. Let me finish, because I'm coming to the Quran. Let me finish. I'm coming to the Quran. My point is it's impossible for you to say no. All of this is not in the hadith. And the Prophet never, the Prophet with his hand he stoned a woman. No, he never did it, and he never married a young child, and he never said anything of that or did anything of that. It's impossible. Now coming to the Quran, what do you do with salb, crucifixion of a human being, crucifying? It's in the Quran. What do you do with this?
Can you say the ayah?
Yes. إنما جزاء الذين يحاربون الله ورسوله ويسعون في الأرض فسادا أن يقتلوا أو يصلبوا.
This is harb.
I'm not talking about this. يصلبوا. The Quran says crucify, crucifixion. أو تقطع أيديهم وأرجلهم من خلاف. Cut their hands and their legs. Okay, what do you do with this? Listen. Now we can talk. Okay, I'm not rejecting. I'm not saying no, it's not in the Quran, not in the Sunnah. Now we come to the methodology. Okay, now we will talk because we have a methodology and we use this methodological features to clear those things. But my point is to say no. Okay, Bukhari, we reject everything because some people this is the way they do. You know.
You don't reject, you question.
I question myself. My whole work is based around questioning all of these things. I question from A to Z. But when for example, I question the hadith, because several scholars, Prophet ﷺ said, "An-nisa'u naqisatu aqlin wa din." Women are lacking intelligence and religion.
Yeah, but the Quran,
It's Bukhari and Muslim, Sahih Bukhari and Muslim. Okay, some people I talk to them, even some of my colleagues. No, Bukhari, it's a human being, so no, we reject that. So we reject. I have a problem. Sorry, I have a problem with this. I have a real deep problem with this. And I did long research on this, and I came to the conclusion that this hadith is an emancipation of women. This hadith, it's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ is enhancing and calling to emancipation of women. So for me, it's the total opposite. But I followed a very rigorous methodology where I used and the problem is, the problem is in understanding this. You know what the problem is? The problem is that the ancient scholar, they did not use their own methodological system on those hadith, because for me the reality, the pressure, their conception on women, etc. It was projected on the text. Okay, you want me to talk about this specific text? Okay. النساء ناقصات عقل ودين. For me, this hadith is a great, emancipation for women. Why? Because I will talk briefly about the study that I did on this hadith. I used different methodological elements here. First of all, I think the global and the comprehensive approach of the Quran is very important. First of all, I ask a question. Why did the Prophet ﷺ, why is he talking here about a distinction between man and woman? So, and then I asked the question in general. The Quran, when he is relevé, when he is relevé les différences entre. When the Quran is highlighting differences between human beings, differences. Why does he does it? This is the question I asked, and I did an istiqra, I did an induction of the text of the Quran, and tried to find all the verses where Allah is differentiating between human beings, between poor and rich, between physical disabled and not physical disabled, between etc. And then I took all of the texts and I did a categorization, because of course one main issue is that it's not like this. So the Prophet ﷺ, when he was talking to the woman and saying that you are different than men and you are less intelligent, it's not like this. There is a reason. One essential point here is that when I did this categorization, I came out with the conclusion that, of course, there is a reason why he does this distinction, and the reason is never to blame. Is never to blame. Or if he blames, there is something. Sometimes he blames for a reason. So here I will not go into these categories that I came up with. One times is to say, for example, just one example. One times is to say that this favor that I give to you and not to you, well, it should get back to the other, and you should, make sure that the other get advantage of this. This is one category of why he's highlighting the difference. Is for you, he telling you should share it with the others, and I give you this, so don't deprive the other from it. This is one category, for example. And then I came to the last category, and for me, there is where we can put the hadith. The last category is where he highlighted the difference in order to say, do something about it. And here I found different texts. For example, one of the texts that says, الأعراب أشد كفرا ونفاقا وأجدر أن لا يعلموا حدود ما أنزل الله على رسوله. Bedouins, they are more more likely, الأعراب أشد كفرا, more likely to fall into kufr, ونفاقا, and to hypocrisy, وأجدر, and more likely أن لا يعلموا حدود ما أنزل الله على رسوله, to not know the limits or the rules that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed to his prophet. Why is Allah revealing here the difference between Arab in this specific case and the other people? Not because to blame him, just blame him for blame him, or not without any reason. This is how the Arab are intrinsically, and that's it. No, because to tell the Arab, do something about it. Either settle yourself and become sedentary, or either maybe do something about it by seeking knowledge, by seeking to know, to get closer to the revelation, etc. And here for me, this hadith is, for me, I categorized here because I have to categorize it. And I did also a study where I found out that it's not impossible to categorize it. For example, again, another example, it's impossible to categorize it somewhere else. Why? Because, for example, the category where he's telling you about the gift he gave you and you should share with others, it's not categorized. You cannot categorize it there because he's talking to women. So if it was like this, man is more intelligent than woman, he should tell man you are more, so that you can share this intelligence with the woman. But he is talking to women, so it's not, you cannot categorize it there. And I found out we cannot categorize it anywhere else. Now it's not finished. Now we are coming to the illah. Why is man or woman less intelligent than woman? And the illah is in the text. I'm not speculating and looking for philosophies. No, it's in the text. And the woman, they asked, why? وما ذلك يا رسول الله? Why are we less intelligent? قال أليست شهادة المرأة نصف شهادة الرجل? Is the testimony of woman not the half than testimony of man? قلنا بلى يا رسول الله. They said yes, that's true. And then they said, why are we less in religion? And he said, أليست إحداكن تقعد نصف ظهرها لا تصلي? You as woman, the half of your life or almost the half of your life you don't pray because of your menstruation. Okay, here we have our illah. Now we have to dig here. What is the issue of testimony, and what is the issue of testimony that makes that women are less intelligent than men? Or here, of course, you don't have time because no, it's not about that. It's not. Yes, it's not about that. But here I don't have time because if you read the scholars, for all of them, because here أليست شهادة المرأة نصف شهادة الرجل, they say this is a general rule that شهادة المرأة, the testimony of woman, is the half of testimony of man. And now we have to deal with this text, and it's easy. In the text itself, you can say that it's not a general rule. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ is not introducing a new injunction or a new ruling, but he is referring to the Quran. And the proof is that قُلْنَا بَلَا. They said yes. How did they know? It's not a new injunction. They knew already because the verse of the Quran. So we should go to the Quran. And then you go to the Quran and you try to find out why is testimony of a woman half. And then you see that it's about financial transaction. And then here we go to the, like I said, I don't have time to go in details. We go to the methodology of al-illa, usul al-fiqh. In usul al-fiqh, الحكم يدور مع العلة وجودا وعدما. We talked about the illa, the rationale. And the Quran is talking about the rationale. He said the rationale of why is the testimony of a woman half. He said, أن تضل إحداهما فتذكر إحداهما الأخرى. That's the rationale. If one of the two women may تضل, she may not understand what's happening here in this, in this transaction, then the other can help her understand. They can deliberate and say, okay, this is what happened. This is, the contract that and the clauses of the contract, etc. This is the purpose. This is the illah. But now the rule in usul fiqh, I'm using their rules. It says الحكم يدور مع العلة وجودا وعدما. And here the illah is مظنة الضلال. مظنة النسيان أو مظنة الضلال, which means that the possibility, it's a high possibility that they forget. So here, if there is no possibility that they forget or that they don't know what's happening, then her testimony should be the same as testimony of male. This is in usul. I'm not doing nothing, I'm not, going against the text. I'm doing nothing but using this rule of usul who says, الحكم يدور مع العلة وجودا وعدما. So which means that the Prophet is telling them that they are less intelligent, not intrinsically because they're women, because they are away from, the social reality. They are away from social reality. So which means that they don't know about this transaction. This is why their testimony is less. This is problematic. You don't know about transaction. So do something about it. Do something about it. How comes that woman doesn't know like men about transaction? And the religions is the same thing. The problem is that you are a big part of your, when you have your menstruation, man is still praying and he's still, of course, if he is really praying, because iqamat as-salat is, if he's really praying, then he will, you cannot compete with him. This is problematic. So the Prophet is saying, do something about it. You can. This is why here we come to. There are a lot of other ways to get in the relation with Allah. You can do everything else but prayer. You can read the Quran. You can remember Allah. You can do so many things. There are so many possibilities. So don't let men be better than you in intellectual and social things. Don't let men be better than you in religion. Compete with them. So for me, this hadith is great emancipation. And my problem is with people, okay, no. This is, so I did not find any answer on this hadith. But, rejecting or saying, the Prophet was joking. The Prophet was joking. This is, I will not say the name, but big scholars say he was just joking. So my problem is to be serious in your methodology. We have to leave for prayer, excuse me. We have to leave for prayer. So, okay, yalla. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.